So good evening everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight is Woke Wednesdays. We do this every single Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Herson Sanchez. I am the host of Woke Wednesdays. Been doing this for 23 months. It'll be 2 years in January. Really excited. And tonight we have a phenomenal group of young people. Can't wait to speak with them. And tonight we're talking about the experiences of gay men. That's the topic. We're going to problematize this. We're going to talk through it, think through it. If this is your first time tuning in, please feel free to ask questions, post comments. This is supposed to be interactive, so let's get started. Y'all ready?
Sure.
Who wants to go first?
Crickets.
Not everyone go at the same time.
Right, so
we don't want to jump at the same. We don't want to jump at the same time, you know.
So, how do you want the introductions to be done? Just name,
Yeah,
birthday,
favorite
social
color.
security.
I mean, not social security because it's in my hand.
I mean, you can try to take my number, but it's not going to go far for you.
Oh
God.
So
okay.
My name is David. David Wilson. I've been on this show, I think 2 times already. So I'm glad to be back to talk about my experience as a gay man in this country, in this state, in this city. So yeah.
Hey everyone, buenas noches. My name is Gary Santos Mendoza. You know, I put the little flavor in there. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I hail originally from New York City. And yeah, I am a PhD student, well, now candidate from student. Going for my higher education degree. So, hola, how you doing?
Hi everybody, my name is Eden Jumper. I am an enrolled member of the Seminole Tribe of Florida. I am currently a student, an activist, just hanging out. I'm here to talk about my experiences with same-gender attraction and masculinity. My pronouns, and I say it like that because my pronouns are they, them. I identify as two-spirited, which is an umbrella term coined in like the 90s by First Nations people in Canada. I definitely have my traits of masculinity and, was raised as a boy and, lived my life like as a gay man at a certain point, but took that and reclaimed it because it is a space that recognizes pre-colonial, pre-contact, before the conquest, before Columbus came, or Western European powers came, that, queer people were here in Native societies. All Native societies were different, and all Native societies had their own different spaces for queer people. And even if you look at how Native societies view gender, outside of the binary of men and women and those two opposites, each Native society had their own beliefs and people who were queer or trans or would be described as so today, who were respected, they were medicine people, they were teachers, they were craftspeople, that's me, where I took that space for myself and found it, and I don't feel like a man, I don't feel like a woman, I feel like an in-between, and that's a space for me to make for myself. Yeah.
And I think this is just so dope that you're talking about this, and we're also going to be having a 2-part episode in January dedicated to First Nations, Native folks. And we'll be talking about this. We'll have a whole episode about this, so extremely excited about that. So definitely, if y'all have questions or comments, please feel free to ask. We're dropping a lot of inside information on you, and I'm more so just gonna facilitate, try to, and want to hear from y'all. So again, please feel free to ask questions and post comments. So where do y'all want to go? Tonight we're talking about the experiences of gay men, which can vary, and we're using the term gay as just this kind of umbrella term. So what do you think folks should kind of know?
Well, I want to just start opening it up with something as simple, because we discussed this a little bit in the beginning of the show, before the show today. The topic of Selena, we were talking about that earlier. We talked about a little bit about the fact that they're looking towards a cisgender white female to portray Selena, Scarlett Johansson, most definitely. You may have heard her. If not, Google her. And the reason I bring this up is we talking about the importance of having characters that identify with how we are as individuals, portrayed in media, portrayed in different mediums of communication. So when we look at that, we take an understanding that sometimes the stories of queer and trans folk, specifically queer trans people of color, and even though it's been up and coming, it's sometimes we're kind of not hitting the bar in which we can say, or someone that is younger can say, yo, I see myself in that character, where it comes to a TV show, where it comes to something on a Netflix show, something on Hulu, so on and so forth. So I think to start it off as a popcorn is, how do we find a place that we can have our identities expressed in these public forms of communication where people are understanding about the experiences of those identified as queer and trans folk, and how do we are able to make sure that the narrative is what we want it to be, even though sometimes while we don't have the control of it, how do we promote baby steps into showing a narrative that comes between who we are?
You know, something that comes to mind as you're speaking about this is when, I don't know if it was last year or a few years ago, there was this sort of revolution with the Oscars and how they weren't nominating black actors and actresses. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember if I saw it on The View, or if it's a video that I saw with Will and Jada Smith, but I think it was The View, and I think Whoopi Goldberg had made the comment of, you know, we weren't seeing black actors and actresses nominated because these production companies weren't hiring black actors and actresses. Mm-hmm. And what the movement started doing was getting production companies and actually getting black-owned production companies to start making that movement towards, you know, writing characters mm-hmm. for African-American actors and actresses and hiring them. And I think that's part of moving that process forward as a baby step. You know, we can identify the problem, and while it's great if people see that, hear it, receive it, and help us move forward, I think sometimes we have to take the initial step and put ourselves out there. You know, if we're not casting trans people of color, then maybe trans people of color need to get into that industry mm-hmm. and start writing characters for themselves and start hiring themselves. And maybe that is the initial step that we can take. And that's, and you know, as you were explaining that, that's where my mind went, because that's what certain actors and actresses started doing, was saying, okay, we're not being casted. Why? Their roles aren't being written for us, and the production companies aren't hiring us. Mm-hmm. So let's become the production companies. Let's start writing our own films and including ourselves, so that people can see what we can bring to the table. And I think that could be one area or one way to start moving that forward.
So in a way, trying to infiltrate kind of the space.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, you know, I definitely feel that way. It's like, definitely in the past, there's been relegation, because so much of like the media and just so much of the modern lens in America is white centric, that Eurocentricness. You know, where our stories as people of color, you know, black people, Latino people, Native people, is never, you know, the center, never told, it's always on the side. That it's now a call to action. You know, that's how it should be taken.
I want to end quickly, like, and as I bring up the example, because something that I could talk about, like, this is an example, this is a narrative that's out there. So it depends to who read the enough of that narrative to know that it was believable, or even as a joke. Mm-hmm. But at the end of it, that narrative exists out there. So now it's kind of like that call to action, because even if we would have known with that, like, how do we put a call to action? How do I call Netflix and tell them, hey, I don't identify that this is the appropriate choice for character in choosing, but, you know, even depending the directive on how that tweet or that announcement was made, that narrative is out there that someone can be easy enough to believe it.
So let me play devil's advocate real quick. And real quick, we have a lot of folks tuning in. People are saying, hi, Gary, the real world lost Steven.
Bigger.
Joe Choa is saying, what up, Greek fan? What's up, Gary?
Oh, okay.
Emily saying, hey. Oh my God, Kia saying, how do you, I have a question. Joey saying, shout out to Eden. David is getting shout outs. Hi to everybody's getting shout outs, basically.
The host's supposed to get a shout out.
Oh, no, I'm good. And I want to play devil's advocate because, and again, I do want to bring it home, right? Because we're talking about the experience of gay men. We're also kind of talking about a class position. because who actually gets to worry about a Netflix special, right?
Mm-hmm.
Poor people don't really have the luxury of worrying about who gets represented or not in a Netflix series special, right? So I do kind of want to put that out there. We're also kind of, when we talk about the experiences of the marginalized, right? It can be gendered, it can be sexuality, it can be race, but oftentimes I think we forget class, because who can even afford Netflix, right? So I just kind of want to throw that out there, and I want to move to a question that we got, which it's a hard question already. Oh my God, it's Key is asking, how do you face or react to homophobic comments?
I'm fortunate enough to say that I don't think anyone has been that bold enough to make one of those comments in front of my face. What I try to do, and obviously, my reaction is going to be different when I'm actually in that situation. But I try to train myself to sort of minimize the point that they're trying to get across. I feel like people who normally want to say something racist or homophobic or insulting want to have a power over you. Like if someone were to call me a fag, they want a reaction out of me. They want me to feel bad about them calling me a fag. And so what I try to practice in my mind so that I'm prepared if and when the day comes that someone comes up to me and calls me a fag, I want to be like, oh my God, thank you. That is the sweetest comment someone has ever said to me.
Yeah.
Because for me to react in a way of, oh my God, I can't believe you said that, I'm feeding into exactly what they want me to do. So while, again, I'm fortunate enough that I don't think I've ever been called a word outside of my name in a negative way, I think sometimes what we can try to do, or at least what I'm trying to do with myself, is train myself to just minimize it. Because if I feed into it, that is exactly what they want. They want to hurt me. So if I, in front of them, portray hurt, they have won. Whereas I want to get myself to a point where I'm going to be dismissive of it, no matter how I feel on the inside. I'm going to be dismissive of it so that interaction just sort of ends right there, hopefully. And they just like, okay, well, obviously my insult didn't work, and they walk away.
And they do it.
But yeah, that's just my input on that.
Yeah, and I feel that, like you were saying, no one is like brazen enough to just be like, oh, you fucking fag, or all those words. But there are those microaggressions, there are those like the stereotypes, there's the prejudices, that queer people face, and so like I get just where people say things that like it slips, it's kind of off, like, oh, or you, or just the little things that of course as the queer person I pick up on, and what's it called? And then it's like a point where it's just like you don't let that face you, because like, or like I have a thing that I just use in general where it's like if somebody says something, like I don't have to correct them, or I don't have to like feel like it's my job to correct them or like fix the situation, but it's something that I want to leave like uncommented or unremarked. Like somebody says something dumb, like, oh, like I don't know, somebody was saying something about my nails the other day, like being too effeminate, and then I was just like, oh well, like I painted my nails like this and I like them like that, and then that's it, and just move down.
And as I look at it, I speak from a place of privilege. The reason is that born and raised in New York City, one of the most open cities I feel like in the country, where gender and sexuality is intermingled with race, class, ethnicity, everything. I speak from a place of privilege because I may not have the similar experiences of some of my colleagues, or more importantly, some of my students. I'm an educator, in which they get these threats on a daily basis. I've been in a place that I've gotten few far in between some of those when I walk down the streets in the city. And don't get me wrong, New York City is my hometown, so I love my city. But I do feel that exists, and I do feel that being in this place of privilege, you have to be much more assertive to be an activist, like you were mentioning before. Being an activist towards the communities of marginalization that do not have a voice. And I feel that within my identity as a cisgender gay male, I have seen myself use my privilege, use my understandings, experiences, and how do I give it back to the community? Because as we look at it at the end of the day, some people may not have the money or the luxury to get to where they need to get to. And some of us, like, let's say as an educator, we don't do it for the money sometimes. We do it because we want to give back to the community in our own specific way. We find a way to be able to nurture the next generation forward. And I feel like sometimes as long as you have that goal, is very important.
And also, what's interesting too, when we talk about words that are pejoratives or derogatory or meant to insult you, you don't have to call someone these specific words to attempt to hurt someone.
Right.
Right? You could use a plethora of other things to already attempt to make you feel marginalized. Right? So I think sometimes also, like, obviously the word is hurtful, but there are also other ways to also insult people, right? Which is also, I think, interesting when we think about just words that we find offensive, just kind of just in general. We have a lot of questions, so I'm going to try to ask them all. Shade Royalty is asking, what are your views on society's acceptance of females in the LGBTQ community versus that of males?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. Wait, what was it? Say it again.
Alright, so what are your views on society's acceptance of females in the LGBTQ community versus that of a male?
Okay, well, let's start out with, like, inherently, like, American society is patriarchal. You know, it's about what men want and what they need or what they perceive that they need, and all the toxicness that's wrapped up in that when you raise men to be a certain way. So, like, you know, in the LGBTQ community, especially the mainstream part of it, the white American part of it, you know, are inherently patriarchal because it's a space that that is tailored for white men, white gay men, to, you know, where they have, where, like, you go to a majority of gay districts, you know, that were, like, honest enclaves or refuge places for queer people and trans people of color in the past. They are gentrified and built up and only, you know, and accessible for white gay men. And so definitely in that, like, you know, white queer women do have a space, but then they're sidelined, and queer women of color are definitely sidelined. You know, it just goes in tow with how, you know, just queer women, women of color, black women especially, are, like, you know, neglected and marginalized more so. I know that in my experience, like, you know, I've wanted to, like, reach out to queer women and have more, like, lesbian friends or queer women friends, but then, like, they, you know, they don't put themselves out there as much. But that's probably the whole other conversation, but just, yes, that's that on that.
You know, I don't have too many people who identify as women and identify as queer. So that's one of the things I've always felt like I wanted to change, to kind of diversify the people that I interact with. But I kind of feel, you know, we have the gay community, and speaking, you know, men, white gay men, and then there's the gay men of color, and they're here. And then I see lesbians slightly below that, but still have that same level of racism within their own community. It's like a subset to a subset of marginalized people. And again, I'm only assuming because I don't know. But then sometimes I see, sometimes I also get a feeling of they are subset to gay men, and they almost, like, don't even care. Because they're like, we're women, we're proud, we got what we got going on. We don't really care because we're lesbians, we don't like penises anyway. But that's kind of one thing I've always wanted to sort of dive into, because I'm not exposed to gay women and gay women of color. So I don't know their struggles. I don't know if the struggles are similar. I can only assume that they are. But yeah, it's a kind of a tough question to answer, since I don't really have a lot of lesbian friends.
From what I can understand, I feel that women get the shaft in every sense of the word. They get the shaft because in the society that we live in, we have, you know, those that how they identify as oppressed, those that are oppressed with certain identities, and those that are not marginalized with certain identities. And I feel like those born as women, from my experiences, from, you know, women that I met, especially in the queer community, I do feel that their experiences do matter, but we don't get to know much about it. I feel like there needs to continue to be that conversation that we are able to understand more where exactly their lived experiences are. Because if we talk about Crenshaw for a little bit and her view of intersectionality.
So Crenshaw, real quick, was a black attorney who kind of coined this idea of intersectionality in like the early 90s, late 80s. She's a scholar, activist, and to her, intersectionality was everyone has multiple identities. So white, gay, poor, whatever.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And if we put it in that view of intersectionality, she also discussed the difference between being black, being a female, and then being a black female. That's an experience in itself. And from what we can understand with intersectionality, everything's intertwined and interconnected to the oppression of systems that exist. And then if we look at it, then you look at people of color. So you already have all of this working against you within that. And I feel that we don't get to hear enough of those stories. And unless you're in like an education from my experience and you get to read upon things, you're privileged to get to know about Gloria Anzaldúa, if you get to read about it, Kimberly Crenshaw, that's how you'll understand it. But I feel that there's some unheard stories that we need to continue to have those conversations to understand.
And also, to be clear, you don't have to read a book to learn these stories, right? You could, everyday people, right? And I guess living in this society, also people sometimes don't feel they can come out, right? And so we end up missing also on those stories. You want to say?
Yeah, a good example that kind of takes us back to when we first started talking about, how do we get society, how do we see ourselves in society and media and what's out there? I never finished watching the season, but I think FX did a great job with the show Pose. And
someone
it was it was
what is Pose, real quick? What is it?
Please break it down.
Well, I don't know if I'm that educated to break down what it is, and because again, and where I was going with this was it's about a culture that I've always been interested about because I hadn't been exposed to it, and so I'm glad that this network did that, because if they hadn't, it would have required me to either meet people involved in that culture, do some reading, do some history.
What culture?
The ballroom scene.
The ballroom scene.
The ball scene. I said ballroom scene, but ball scene.
No, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and explain
a little
from
what. Now, I hope no one crucifies me on this because I've only watched 2 episodes, so don't get at me. PhD student, no life. But with it brought around the discussion of the ball scene and more or less about trans communities of color, which is very important to the conversation. So, and I say trans communities of color very prominently because that was the story that started to be understood, and there's an array of characters that discuss from the 2 episodes I've seen, more or less their struggles and how they fit in within this house. Right. And some people, what they don't know is that there's been some things on the ball scene that's come out before. Paris is Burning, epic movie, and it was one of the first queer and trans movies for me that I was just like, oh my god, I am living for this. Because not only it had the connotation of New York, but most importantly, it talked about a scene that I never would have thought.
Right.
Unless I would have saw it on someone's Instagram or someone's other mediums in social media. So there's and I said that there's things out there. I think it's just continuation to promote it.
Right.
I think. Sorry, Real. I just wanted to just comment because it pertains to what we're talking about.
Okay.
The Real World Last Steven is saying Pose is doing a really good job at hiring trans and LGBT folks
yes.
of color and putting them on the mainstream or on the main
on the screen. Yeah.
Thank you, homie.
Yeah. So we have a really, I think. Real quick, let me read. Ellis also said, females are over-sexualized in the LGBT community. It's a fetish for most straight men, and that's why they are accepted more. And we have a question. From Kaisha. Kaisha loves you, asking, how can I support my friend that has recently come out? Come out of where? No,
right, yeah.
First of all, come out of where? That's a good question to ask for, because there's many ways to think of this.
It kind of really depends on who the person is. You really need to know your friend. I think, again, I'm speaking from a place of privilege. When I came out to my friends, I received a lot of love. At the point that I came out, I had already spent enough years accepting who I was. So whether they were cool with it or not, I didn't really give an F. You know, fortunately enough, I didn't lose any friends through that process. But I think just, it sounds corny, it sounds cliche, but just kind of being there and just not necessarily needing to give advice or needing to do anything, but just letting them know I'm here for you if you just need to come and sit in my apartment and just sit. A lot of the times, I do come from a place where I've struggled with mental health and things like that, and kind of what I needed from friends was, I don't need advice. I don't need you to tell me what you think. I've read enough. I know enough. There's really not much you can say that I don't know about it. What I kind of just need you to do is just sit here with me in peace. Yes. Like, let's just watch Family Guy and just sit next to me and let's just laugh. You know, just kind of being there so that they know, should they need to talk to you about something, that they have someone and you're that person. And so when I say just being there for them, that's what I mean. Just letting them know whatever you need. If you need to talk, if you just need to sit in my apartment, if you need to cry on my shoulder, if you just want to go out and eat pizza and talk about the sky being blue, I'm here for you. I think people just need to know that they have someone. Mm-hmm. I think that speaks volumes for people who are going through that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think and this goes personally to the viewer. I think if you asking that question, I think provides an inclusion in a space that when that person is going to need to be supported, you're providing it already.
Yes.
Most importantly, even if the person's coming out with their sexual orientation or their gender identity, because we also want to include gender identity with this, it is a privilege because, and I've said the word privilege a bunch of times today, but with it is a privilege because they are letting you come into their world to understand this is who they are unapologetically.
Being told. Oh, okay.
Yeah, who they are unapologetically, and they have entrusted you to say this. I've seen a couple of times within or different organizations that people are forcibly came out. One organization, I saw someone that forcibly came out because someone told another person, and gossip falls around in a tree.
They were outed.
They were outed. There we go. And just understand, to best support them is understanding that space. And also, there's also that suspicion that happens sometimes when you may think someone is of something, or they may be of a sexual orientation or something of the sort, which we never want to go to that assumption. And that does happen because we're not going to ignore that white elephant like it doesn't happen. It does happen still today.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate.
I've done that before.
And that's what I'm saying. And I think we've been to levels that when we've gone through our development, we've learned on how to acknowledge it. But now where we're at as, in a way, activists, how do we provide support and space for those individuals to be able to move forward and be able to be and have all the resources as possible? I was kind of curious with if you could explain a little bit to the viewers about Two Spirited, because you were talking about a little bit in the beginning of the program, but I think it's an interesting topic to understand more.
I feel like going on that coming out, that would be good something. Okay, so like I was saying before, I would say I identified, but I am Two Spirited, which is a place for like Native queer identity. Lots of times nowadays it's just put down to like being like a cis gay lesbian person, but taking into context that pre-colonial identity and that pre-colonial space, of like masculine and feminine traits, and like an in between, or whatever else. That's where I fit in. Where I'm just like I'm me. I'm Eden. I'm a Seminole queer person. But let me think. I was trying to think of like what I could say to that question, because like that is like a genuine question to want to ask, to want to support a friend who has come out or going through that process. I just know that when I like in my community, like there's not a lot of queer people, not a lot of openly like lesbian, gay, bisexual, like anybody. I've grown up just pretty much like having like a pretty like lonely like coming out experience in that. And like Native communities aren't exactly like not receptive to that, but there is that transphobia and homophobia and prejudice, that is so prevalent nowadays, and also but also introduced through Christianity in the church. You know, there are a lot of Christians and Baptists on the reservation, and if you go to any other reservation in North America, there are churches. So you know, I was fortunate enough, I guess, you know, I was privileged in that people didn't necessarily like. It was always just put down to like, oh, that's Eden. You know, like we all know Eden. That's just Eden, and that was that. And you know, my queerness was just in that, or like my femininity, or like that expression of that was just in that. You know, like I was Eden. I was different than other boys, other guys. And what really helped me when I came out, I don't know, yeah, definitely just having like people to lean on. I was fortunate enough to like have my family, my siblings. It took a while for my mom to come around. Fortunately, my dad was surprisingly there, and just I don't know. Yeah, it was just I didn't.
So if I can ask a follow-up question to this, so a couple months ago we did have an episode on the coming out experience, and one just like really I think point that I had never thought of before was one of the young women. One young lady, she said, the constant need to come out. She's like, you don't just come out once. You're coming out every single day.
Yes.
Right? So whether you step into office space, a classroom, whatever. What do y'all think about this constant need of someone trying to figure you the fuck out? As if, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense.
You know, I don't quite... I don't want to say I don't quite agree with that. It just hasn't been my experience. There's been very few times where I've had to consistently come out and say I'm gay. And again, I've done that earlier on in my years, and that was basically, I don't know if it was a defense mechanism, but it was just to say, you know, this is who I am, either take it or leave it, don't waste my time, kind of, you know, that kind of situation. But I think more now, I don't come out by saying those words. I may say certain things, I may act a certain way, and people are like, are you gay? I'm like, yeah, like where were you? You know, I was working in an office, and the director secretary, I don't know how we jumped on this conversation. She goes, you know, for 2 years I did not know you were gay. And I said, Erica, I've literally come to your desk. You've had a magazine of, I can't forget who the actor was, and I said, he's hot. And she was like, oh, I just thought you were comfortable with your sexuality. And I was like, Erica, really? So for me, it's kind of just, I try to just live my life. I say the things that I say, I do the things that I do, regardless of who's around. So I don't feel like because straight people don't come out. When I meet someone, my friends don't go, hey, this is so-and-so, they're straight. No one does that. So I don't feel the need to, if I'm being introduced to someone, and it's kind of annoying when my friends sometimes do it. They say, oh, this is our gay friend David. I'm like, why can't I just be your friend David?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, the gay part of me is awesome, and it's probably a thing you like about me, but you don't introduce that person as a straight person. So you don't really need to introduce me as a gay person. And I would like for people to stop feeling the need to come out in the terms of saying I'm gay. Like, let people figure it out on their own. You know, like, just be you, and if they figure it out, great. If they don't, that's fine as well. I don't see the benefit, I guess, from my experience, not having to say I'm gay. So I've always just been who I am, and if people finally figure it out by the fourth time I reference, you know, finding a guy attractive, you know, that's just how, that I feel like for me is the best way I can be natural in who I am. And so I guess in a way I do come out by the things that I say, but I'm going to say it regardless. So whether I'm hanging out with a bunch of gay friends or I'm hanging out with a bunch of straight friends, if I see a guy with a nice ass, I'm going to point that out. And so,
yes, you will.
Yeah, I will. Person knows. So if that means I'm coming out every time, I guess. But when I hear that sort of comment, I think about people having the need to clarify their sexual orientation or their sexual identity, anytime they meet someone new. And I just wish people shouldn't have to do that. Just be who you are, and it really just should not matter.
It's like that bigger conversation, the bigger topic of living in a heteronormative world where you are, it's like demands that are required of you, where like inherently everyone just like
Real quick, what's a heteronormative world?
Heteronormative world where it's like everybody is assumed straight unless clarified otherwise. Basically, you know, like where straight is the default, even though, you know, like
Innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, even though it's not like
interesting way of putting it. There you go.
Yeah. Just I don't know. Yeah.
And it's also reproduced, right? So like through movies, constant assuming.
It's like It is like heterosexual Pride Day. That's the best way I can say it. It's like every day heterosexual Pride Day.
Yeah,
every day.
Millennials. Yeah.
Like I get assumed, your husband. People call your husband your wife. You sing, certain types of language. It's just like not inclusive. And I'll be guilty of it, like in the beginnings of me trying to understand myself,
right.
Until like when I started learning more about my community in a sense, that's where I caught it, and I'm just like, I can't do this. I cannot be saying these things, and I feel like it's unfortunate, and there has to be a way in order to just get to that level. I remember when the beginnings of my coming out, I remember praising that I was gay, that I was this, and I knew it, and it was via actions. And I'll be honest, like I remember when I was going through a scholarship interview that I had, and we were talking about, hi, I'm Gary, and I'm gay, and that was like 18-year-old me going for an interview, but the thing about it is, and this is being honest, I'm appreciative that happened. Yeah. Because over time, for me, I was able to understand that, and I can use theory in this, but I'm keeping it to simple basics. Like over time, my identity came as a part of me to understand that I'm just Gary. Yeah. I'm not Gary, the gay cisgendered Latino from Amsterdam Avenue, New York City, but I'm Gary. And whenever it's me trying to come out again, not many people still get to that level, because I think we're all in different levels of coming out, whether that be through gender, whether that be through sexual orientation. And I do believe that we all are in different areas that, the conformability has to be there. So like right now, if someone were to ask me that, I'm like, I'm Gary, I love the Yankees. I'm mad that they haven't won the World Series in the past 5-10 years, but I like eating pizza, I love long walks in the park, getting caught in the rain. I'm an Aquarius. I like having fun. I like being a go-go to my nieces and nephews.
It's in a dating app.
I thought that was a topic for next week's but overall, with that, it's just like it's part of me, and the identity's part of me, and we need to acknowledge it. For others, it isn't. So you have to just continue to provide support.
And identity is such a tricky and complicated thing. Identity also kind of works. It works in such just many and mysterious ways, but sometimes also works in relation. All right, so if you all were in a group of just all gay men, your gay identity might not be like the first thing you're thinking about. It might be, maybe my ethnicity might be something I might think about more, right? But if you're in a room of all straight people, then that identity might come out. So it's constant fluctuating, constantly changing in relation to stuff. I think David and I were talking about the show, Dear White People, season 2, and like the relationship that Troy has with, what's his name?
God, I don't
the
know.
nerdy kid.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
And it was just kind of dope to see, and this is I'm segueing because I want to ask y'all a question about having straight friends. And Dear White People, I think it's really dope. Troy's relationship with, was it Malcolm? No, Lloyd?
No, it's
Lionel.
Lionel.
They have such a dope relationship as a straight man and a gay man, which to me is rare to see. And so go ahead.
That's really weird because
this is good.
This is interesting. It's when I talk to I do have a gay friend that is baffled by the fact that I have 95% of my male friends are straight. And they just don't get it. They're like, I don't understand it. I'm like, what don't you understand? He was like, I don't understand how you have straight guy friends. And this goes back to, again, being privileged, and when coming out, my friendships didn't change. And I think part of that was when I met people, they met David. The gay part came later. So I guess part of that was, okay, so we know who David is. Okay, so he likes guys. All right, great. That's, side comment. So I love my friendships. I love all my friendships. But I especially love my friendships with my straight guy friends because I think it allows them to experience a gay man in a different way than they probably would see on a screen, whether it's in a movie or on a TV or on social media. I cherish it. I love it. I mean, Hurst and I have been friends for years, and I think the thing that connected, I don't even know if, when did you know?
Are you a girl?
Yeah. Because I don't think I ever
I saw you. So David and I met salsa dancing, and I saw him dancing with another guy, and I had never seen them before.
Typical.
No, we were at some little spot.
Just ask me.
We've danced at Typical before. So I just kind of assumed that he was gay, but it was like.
So for me, my relationships with my straight guy friends, I cherish. Part of it because most of them make me feel like a princess, and that's that's great. I love it. Sometimes they hold the door open for me. I'm all about it. Sometimes I get my chair pulled out. I love it.
Patriarchy.
I like to be pampered. I like to be pampered sometimes.
No, we said all genders and lifestyles.
Right. So for me, it's again my friendships, my life didn't change when I finally decided to say this is who I am, and when for some that I said those words, I am gay, our friendship didn't change, and we continued being friends. And so for me, it's kind of like not a weird thing at all. It's just kind of a normal, these are just my friends. Majority of them just so happen to like women. We all make mistakes. What can I say?
What was the question again?
Having straight friends.
Oh yeah, okay. I know. I really vibe with that, like with what you're saying. Like I'm not. Yeah, like I've grown up, being friendly with all kind of people. That's kind of my thing. Especially like I said, growing up in a place where like I was the only queer person. I always made it a point to befriend all kinds of people. But now and recently, I've made it a point to only really like befriend and support and be around queer people. So other than the people I grew up with or people I'm related to that are straight.
No. Get out!
No. I didn't want to get that way to make it about you, but
see how focus just went?
No.
This direction.
I can see. I feel like I'm not against I'm being friends with straight people or non-queer people, but I don't know. I just like appreciate I'm just in a place right now where I just want to only be receptive to that and give my time and energy there. But yeah,
I think for me, for those straight individuals or straight folk that are able to understand just me and then later get to know everything about me, my likes, my dislikes, my sexual orientation, all these things, I'm very appreciative. I know that identifying as Latino, sometimes that becomes a challenge because there's this machismo that exists. And with this machismo of being Latino, a lot of you have a heterosexual gentleman or heterosexual men that you meet. I just think about my experiences with those that, live on the street in New York, those that are from the hood that just go outside and, in my area, thankfully we've been able to have peace and respect. But, having to be me is very challenging sometimes, around when I was growing up, because it was like this expectation of machismo, what girl you're with, when you're going to go to the club, when are you going to pipe her, all these other things that came up. And, and with some of the people that I know, and there's some that I have friends that they're straight and bless them because we've been able to maintain a relationship for over 20 years. It's still a learning opportunity to explain that to them of what exactly I am. And, it's not because I have to constantly come out, but as a straight individual, they want to just learn more. because they are now parents. They have kids. You know, they have, and I have like my niece is watching this right now, so I'm sorry for anything that was said, Ashley and Emily and everyone else is watching. But besides that, and Valencia, I do believe that it just provides an opportunity for them to learn more, and then to be able to just say, hey, this is a little bit about me. And then there's some that don't understand it, that won't want to open it up because they're like, you know, but what girl you gonna be with? I could convert you. I could do this. And at the end of it, you know, blissfully, I'm like, you know what? It's not me. We can have some peace and respect that, but just, we're not gonna flow.
You know, I love people who always ask me, you know, have I ever been with a woman? And I say no. I think from an early age, I kind of knew what my sexual orientation was without knowing what my sexual orientation was. So they're like, well, how do you know you're not straight if you've never had sex with a woman? And I love this question because I jump straight to, well, will you have sex with a guy? Have you had sex with a guy? And like, no, I would never do that. I'm not gay. Well, it's the same thing. It works the same way. You know, I don't need to have sex with a woman. Hey, and I always tell them, listen, the day I have sex with a woman, boom, come sleep with me, and then tomorrow I'll go sleep with a woman. I'm ready to do it. You know, let me know when you're down.
The interesting thing about it for me is like, none of your business. Did you have sex with, like, just out of respect that I not need to know unless you're like blabbing it to the whole neighborhood or the block or everything, that is your prerogative. You know, kudos to you. But for me, it's like, you shouldn't even know what exactly, if I slept with a woman or slept with a man, or how many women or men. It's like, nah, none of your business. Man, just kick rocks, keep it moving. But, you know, sometimes there's that curiosity, and people want to assume and want to know, and it's just like...
So question, so do you think that curiosity, not condoning the curiosity, but it kind of kicks in for these individuals when they find out your sexual orientation? Because if you were straight and they had just met you, then I can say they'd be asking, yo, how many girls you been with? Do you think in their mind it comes from, oh, this person's gay, I gotta try to, this constant trying to figure people out?
I agree with that, and that's why I make the comments that I make. I think for someone who doesn't, or maybe has not been exposed to gay culture, or someone who is gay, listen, I am 100% understandable someone who loves vagina. I'm sure it's great, because you talk about it all the time. I'm sure it's great. So when someone says, that's like someone who goes, I love fried chicken, and someone's like, well, I've never had fried chicken. What? You should have fried chicken. Go have fried chicken. Because I love it so much, I want someone else to love it just as much as I do. And I think it could be where that comes from, which is why I always respond the way I do, because it's probably someone who's just like, I love vagina. It's great. If you tried it, I'm pretty sure you would like it. And it's like, no, I wouldn't, because I don't like vagina. So I do think for some it probably does come from a place of, you know, either curiosity or vagina's all they know. So it's like, how can you not love what I love, kind of thing.
Yeah. When I hear like all that, to me, I kind of like, I think, and it feels like it begs a more bigger question of like in heteronormativity and how like the heteronormative world approaches queer people and gay people. Like, I mean, we talked about this, I touched upon this a little bit before, where it's like we're inherently viewed as, you know, sexual deviant people, and also like it kind of opens up a bigger question of like how, I guess, you know, stereotypical straight men view like relationships with women and commodifying them as sexual objects and so forth and so forth. You know, it's like dissecting that, and like that whole bigger thing, and just understanding like, yeah, like we're like, they may relate to their friends, their guy friends, on like pussy and vagina and like getting more women and stuff like that. And then like, you know, so then like, and because we're gay, like, you know, oh, like and we're men, you know, like, oh, we like to fuck too all the time. It's just super interesting and super like icky and weird. I don't know.
Real quick, so Eden, you said something really interesting before the show started, and you were talking about how when people associate a sexual orientation other than straight, it is automatically sexualized, right? As if that it is just reduced to just being sexual. I was wondering if you kind of elaborate a little bit more on that.
I don't know, and it's just with that othering of queer people, where like we're robbed and we're devalued for our ability to have relationships outside of sex. And when you look at it, like, everybody has like relationships that aren't inherently romantic or inherently sexual. We have coworkers, we have family, we have friends, we have the people on the street. Like, those aren't inherently sexual relationships, but we as queer people are robbed of that.
I kind of think, and someone who knows more than I do can correct me if I'm wrong. I think when the LGBTQ community first started having their pride and started taking back their sort of marginalized status, it was a place of freedom. And I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do because this is who I am. And I think part of that may have played, and I think this was probably around the 70s. And during that time, whether you're gay or straight, sex was just like what everybody was doing.
Run around.
And I think as gay people started coming out more and just saying, this is who we are, we're here, we're queer, I think around that time of everything just being sexualized, people took that as the norm for the gay community. Mm-hmm. And then I think that sort of language was emphasized in TV shows and in movies. Mm-hmm. And again, if that is all that is portrayed of a community, mm-hmm. of course it's easy for people to say, oh, you're gay, you must sleep around, or you must be overly sexualized, because that's all they know. That's all they've been told. Mm-hmm. I remember watching a news clip of a guy who called into, I think it was CNN, and it was an African-American woman host, and he basically asked her, how do I become less racist?
Oh yeah, the white dude. Yeah.
And because he was telling her, all I see on TV is black people killing each other and robbing, and all I see is negative, reinforcing the negative.
Stereotypes, yeah.
And it's stereotypes. And so I think, it's fighting a battle on two fronts. It's one, understanding that a lot of people, what they're viewing is of one thing, and so that's all they're gonna know until we start to take that back. I'm glad that networks and movies are putting in these storylines for the LGBT community, but now it's time to take it a step forward, because we're not all the same, and we don't do all the same things. Yeah. So it's kind of at this point almost, I can't find the word I'm trying to think of, but it's almost at this point you're doing us a disservice by continuing to enforce a certain aspect of the gay community, because it's different now. Maybe in the 70s, sex was the biggest thing because during the 70s, that's what everybody was doing. And it was also a coming out of an entire community where, they wanted to be free, they wanted to express themselves. And in that era, sexual expression everyone was doing that. But we've evolved from that. And until we start portraying other aspects of this community, people are only going to see one thing.
I think also and just to just put this into context, it also depends on the person and their viewpoint on how they see this movement to come. Like, I could say within those pride movements, and for those that don't understand, why isn't there a straight pride? Because I've seen the memes and things about why isn't there no straight pride. Be happy you don't have a pride.
Exactly.
I just want to point that out. Be happy you don't have a pride. Because the fact we need a pride in order to talk about, our lives, our individual, points of pride of us as being people. We need those days and those months. Like, we look at LGBTQ month in October. We look at prides that happen all over the country, and some places all over the world. Also, Stonewall Pride is happening in New York in June of, because 1969 Stonewall. And, we had 1969 Stonewall riots. Everyone knows about that. Preemptive, there were other things that were going on as well before that, but of the modern gay rights movement. And, it goes to your point of, just understanding just sex. I think, and just from my view, I feel that the prides over the years have started to open up more discussions towards different sexual orientations, which then came into talking about gender. Right. And I feel that, they were talking about this back in the day, but there were different focuses. Like, I was very intrigued that we talk about gay marriage and around, the late, 2000s. And we're like, oh, we have gay marriage. We have this going on. We have this going on. But, we talk about now the new revolution, which is people of color. We talk about trans. We talk about the intersectionality of that. And even more interesting, because we brought upon the topic of when Pride last year, we started having flags that had the brown color and the black color. Yes. And I'm going to be honest, from what I see, and y'all can disagree with me with this, like, it has taken time to have that there because people didn't see it as some sort of an important thing to discuss. But, like, I have all memorabilia with all rainbows, but I'm just like, it's inclusion that we need, and we need to be able to have those spaces, especially those prides, in order to talk.
Real quick, because we're running out of time.
Oh, Lord. Ooh.
It's 9:56. We have 4 minutes left.
Wow.
Yeah.
This one quick.
Real quick, I want to read this comment because I think it's absolutely just brilliant and insightful. And I think it's something that we've kind of missed throughout this conversation tonight. From Tapakti _ Kuyamet.
Yeah.
The idea that only women have vaginas is problematic. There are hella trans gay men with vaginas who are real men that cis gays ignore / are disgusted by. I'll read that again because I think this was just I didn't even think of it. The idea that only women have vaginas is problematic. There are hella trans gay men with vaginas who are real men that cis gays ignore / are disgusted by. And I think when it comes to language around LGBTQ communities, we're kind of, to quote my roommate, he always says that we're kind of building the plane as we're flying it. Mm-hmm. We're trying to figure out this language, right, as we're learning more. When it comes to race, it is extremely nuanced in the United States. We have all these terms that we can kind of use. But when it comes to LGBTQ, we're all still learning a lot, right, with language and all this stuff. So, real quick, I just wanted to read it because I thought it was such a brilliant point. Mm-hmm. We literally have less than 3 minutes left. So if y'all could just kind of impart something on the people. 30 seconds left. And real quick, if you missed it, we're also going to talk about Two Spirits come January. Can't wait for that. So real quick, y'all, what some parting words?
Yeah, let me jump on that. Thank you, Pal. I appreciate that. I know them.
Okay.
And that, yeah, like when we start talking about, the bigger conversation of like color and gender, that we must also take into consideration that, there are men with vaginas and that there are women with penises, but also like gender identity doesn't revolve around, that. Doesn't revolve around anatomy or biology. And even those are things that you can contend. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that, I don't know, that
absolutely.
I've definitely noticed that conversation.
No, absolutely.
And that's something to always remember and think about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, how we
That's another episode too. Yeah, for sure. No, for sure.
You got your next episode.
Go ahead.
And I think for those that stay on this, I think that stayed throughout this whole conversation, appreciative because of the fact that you opened up to learn more. I do feel that
10 seconds.
Yeah, but no, most definitely. Thank you. It's this conversation is going to keep evolving. I think experiences of just being a gay male and going through heteronormativity, there's more stories of different identities and what affects them and what exactly those narratives are there. So please continue to be open to the narratives that we may not have heard of so that you can be able to get more of a learning out of it.
For sure.
Just be understanding of other folks and their journey. We really can't move forward as human beings if we're not willing to understand someone else's journey, someone else's lifestyle. That's how we're going to grow and move forward.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much. I'm sorry the ending was so rushed. I think we covered a lot tonight. If you missed it, this will be posted to the Instagram story for the next 24 hours. And as always, every single episode is posted on YouTube. The link is in our bio. I tagged every single one of these amazing individuals on the promo video today, so if you'd like to add them, I hope that's cool, right? Can they follow y'all? And if you don't want to follow, thank you again so much. Tune in next week. We have Miss Indian North Carolina 2018-2019 on the show. She's part of the Lumbee Native American tribe in North Carolina. Cannot wait. So yeah, tune in, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Definitely.